Hey guys, tonight we're diving into a time and place where the cold doesn't just nip at your nose, it actively tries to kill you. Picture this: the endless rolling plains of the Dakota Territory in the 1880s, a sky that feels too big, wind that never stops talking, and nothing between you and the Arctic air but a few wooden planks, some sod, and an unhealthy amount of optimism. Yeah, you probably won't survive this. But hey, you're stubborn. You came here with dreams, a mule, a half-frozen child or two, and that one pan you always forget on the stove. So before you get comfortable, take a moment to like the video and subscribe, but only if you genuinely enjoy what I do here. Also, let me know in the comments where you're watching from and what time it is. I'm guessing it's well past bedtime, huh? Now, dim the lights, maybe turn on a fan for that soft background hum. And let's ease into tonight's journey together. You're on the open prairie. There's nothing but golden grass, hard-packed dirt, and a sky smeared with streaks of high cirrus clouds. You thought you had more time. It's only early October, but the nights are already slicing through your blankets, and there was frost on the pump handle this morning. A warning, one you feel deep in your spine. The older folks at the general store back in town, you remember their eyes. They said this winter would be a killer, but you thought maybe that was just frontier drama. You told yourself, they always say that. Now, you're not so sure. The land doesn't lie. You smell its snow coming. You feel it in your teeth. Migrating geese flew south last week in frantic V's, and the squirrels in the cottonwoods hoarded every last kernel they could find, like they knew something you didn't. And now here you are pacing out the perimeter of your plot, holding a scrap paper plan for a shelter you're not entirely sure how to build. The days are getting short. You can't afford to waste a single one. You pitch a tent first, canvas moldy from the last storm, and sleep fully dressed beside your wife, both of you shaking in the wind. She doesn't complain, not because she isn't cold, but because she's trying to be strong for the kids. You hear the baby cry around midnight, little hands already chapped and red. You warm her against your chest and think, we'll build tomorrow. That morning, you ride to the edge of the nearest creek and find a ridge where the wind doesn't hit so hard. That's where you'll set your claim shack. There's no lumber mill nearby. No way you can afford to ship planks from the east. And the scrub trees lining the creek aren't nearly thick enough for a proper log cabin. So you do what everyone else is doing. You start digging. You dig down into the side of the hill, scraping away the frost-hardened surface until you hit soil that crumbles in your hands. Earth insulation, your new best friend. A Sod-House. They call it a sody. It's more like a grass-covered bunker. Walls 2 feet thick, roof made of overlapping chunks of root-packed turf, all stacked like bricks. You wonder how anything built out of dirt is supposed to keep out a blizzard. But you don't have time for doubt. You slice long strips of sod using a spade and a home-forged blade. It's hard work, back-breaking. Each chunk weighs more than you expect. The roots hold the soil together, a natural binding agent. You lay them with the grassy side down, the roots out, so they interlock like a living quilt. It's weird, kind of genius actually. The smell of damp grass hangs in the air even as you work by lantern light into the evening. Your hands split, blisters open, then harden. Your wife wraps them with rags soaked in homemade salve, grease, beeswax, something someone said works. You don't ask questions. You just keep laying sod. By the third day, you've carved out a room big enough to hunch inside. You make a frame out of the few boards you do have. Wagon parts, salvaged fence posts, the old handle of your shovel that finally gave out. It's janky, but it holds. The roof goes on last. You lay a sod across poles, then top it with any extra hay you can find. Rain or melting snow will seep through. You know that already, but what choice do you have? You light a fire inside for the first time on day 5. The smoke curls out through a hole in the roof, and for a moment it feels like home. Not a real home, but the kind where no one dies of exposure, which at this point feels like a luxury. The kids pile under quilts in the corner. You can still see their breath, but it's better, much better. You dig a root cellar next, because if you don't, your potatoes will freeze. And if the potatoes freeze, well, let's not talk about that. You cover the opening with logs and dirt and pray it doesn't cave in the first time the wind starts howling like a pack of coyotes with bronchitis. And the wind does come. That night, it shrieks across the plain. You lie awake listening to the Sod-House creak. A draft sneaks through one corner and your wife stuffs it with her only good dress. You want to tell her not to. She might need that dress, but you don't say anything. Instead, you hold her hand. You fall asleep with your fingers wrapped around the handle of the axe, just in case. Not because you think someone's coming, but because weirdly it comforts you. By morning, the prairie is white, not dusted, buried. The tent outside gone, flattened under 2 feet of snow. The trail back to town vanished. You step outside and immediately regret it. Your boots freeze to the threshold. You have to crack them loose and shuffle back in, but the soda held. The walls are still up. The roof sagged, sure, but it didn't collapse. And the inside, it's cold, but not deadly. You made it through the first snow, not the last. Never the last. You wake up with a bit of dirt on your face again. The sod above you has started to shed little chunks overnight. It always does that when the moisture in the roof freezes and thaws like the ceilings breathing along with you. You brush it off your cheek and roll over slowly, every joint stiff from the cold and from yesterday's labor. Your breath puffs in front of you, white and ghostly. The fire burned down hours ago, and it's too cold to delay any longer. You crawl out from beneath the pile of quilts, careful not to wake the kids, and toss a few more chunks of wood into the iron stove. It groans, then sparks to life. One flame, then another. That sound, tiny fire chewing through bark, feels like survival. Breakfast is a lump of cornmeal mush. It's gritty and bland, but it's warm, and warm counts for a lot right now. You glance around your freshly finished Sod-House, still half amazed it's standing at all. Thick, uneven walls, every surface a blend of prairie roots and desperation. The roof bows slightly in the middle, packed heavy with turf and snow, and you can hear the wind again, not screaming yet, just whispering, testing the seams. You remember how it all started a few weeks ago when you arrived and realized the fantasy of a cute little log cabin with a chimney and lace curtains was just that, a fantasy. There's no lumber, no forest, just an ocean of grass and dirt that stretches in every direction. So you, like your neighbors, had to trade the American dream for something that looked more like a giant loaf of bread, plopped in the middle of nowhere. The Sod-House, as ugly and crude as it is catching on across the plains. It's not because it's charming, it's because it's what works. You learn quickly that the walls, when packed properly, are better at holding in warmth than any thin board could be. You've seen families who insisted on sticking with their canvas tents or flimsy clapboard shacks. They don't last. The wind finds every gap, and soon enough the wind's not the only thing creeping in. Snow, ice, even rodents start to make themselves comfortable. One man down the way found a rattlesnake curled up behind his stove, half frozen but still mean. Sod is different. It insulates. You can lean your whole weight against it and feel the dull, solid chill of the earth rather than the slicing cold of air. And honestly, it's all you have. You've gotten to know your spade better than most relatives back home. Every sod brick you cut and laid is a silent prayer. Please hold. Please stay dry. Please don't collapse in the middle of the night and bury us all. Today, you visit a neighbor who just finished their Sod-House too, but took a slightly different route. Instead of digging into a hillside like you did, they built theirs freestanding above ground. That means taller walls, a little more light, but also more wind exposure. You step inside and immediately notice the difference. It's brighter, sure, but it's colder too. The walls don't feel as snug. Snow snakes in under the door frame, and you make a mental note to double up your own door's cloth flap when you get back. Still, they seem proud. You chat a while, share some coffee, weaken reused grounds, but it's warm, and trade building tips. Their secret, they stack the sod grass side in, not out. It's a debate now among the settlers. Grass in means more root insulation. Grass out means better water runoff. Which one's better? No one agrees. There's no guidebook out here, just folk wisdom passed from one frostbitten hand to another. On the way back, the wind picks up again. You tug your coat tighter. It's patched so many times you barely remember what the original fabric looked like. The kids wave from the doorway as you approach. Your daughter's hair is full of hay from sleeping too close to the wall, and your boy has somehow managed to get soot on his nose before breakfast. You smile anyway. They're still laughing, still warm. That's all that matters. Inside, you inspect the ceiling again. You added extra poles last night, wedged between the rafters and the floor, just in case. It's not elegant, but it might buy you time. You keep replaying stories you heard at the last church meeting, how one family had their roof cave in during a storm last year. The weight of the snow was too much. They were lucky to be outside feeding the animals when it happened. Not everyone's so lucky. That's the real kicker with these sod homes. They keep you warm, but they also want to kill you. It's a constant back and forth. If it rains too much, the walls dissolve into mud. If it dries out too fast, they crack open and let the wind in. You have to keep replinging the outside with fresh mud mixed with straw or anything fibrous you can find. One woman, uses horsehair. Another swears by cattail fluff. A few of the more desperate folks, they use manure. Yep, cow pies. Turns out dried dung is a surprisingly decent insulator and filler. The smell, though, less than charming. Your wife comes in holding a broken handle from one of the cooking pots. You both sigh. It's the third pot this season, cracked from heating too fast on the stove. You know you'll have to repair it with wire again, or maybe barter with the blacksmith next time you're in town. But trips to town are rare now. The snow's deepening. The horses don't like it. And the last time someone tried the trip, they got turned around by a ground blizzard and wandered in circles for hours before collapsing against their own barn door. You make a list in your head, reinforce the roof again, patch the corner near the stove, check the sod layer on the north wall, remod the outer base. The work never ends. Shelter out here isn't a place, it's a process. You sit down next to the stove and press your hands against its sides. The iron hums with life, even as the world outside turns to ice. It's cozy in that low, desperate sort of way. The kind of cozy that doesn't last unless you keep fighting for it. But it's enough for now. You're out before the sun, boots crunching over a crust of snow that froze solid overnight. The sky is bruised with early light, pale purple bleeding into steel gray. And the wind has a mean edge this morning. Not a shriek, not yet, but a low, insistent growl. Like the prairie's telling you to hurry up and stop pretending it's still fall. You've got plans today. Big ones. The Sod-House has held so far, but the draft coming through the north wall has gotten personal. So you're helping your neighbor raise a proper log cabin, or at least the closest thing to one within walking distance and budget of absolutely broke. He's managed to track down a few logs dragged in from the creek bottom where some half-dead cottonwoods were cut last spring. The logs are scrawny and full of knots. Definitely not the perfect straight timber you see in books about the good old pioneer days. But that's the thing. They never show the naughty stuff, or the fact that half the cabins were basically drafty sheds with a porch slapped on as an afterthought. You meet him in a clearing, boots sinking into snow that's already knee-deep in spots. The wind hits your teeth like broken glass. You both nod, no words, because why talk when your face is frozen and you've got logs to lift? You get to work prying one from the sled, shoulders aching immediately. You grunt and curse through your scarf while he swears back, and together you hoist the log onto the growing wall of his half-built home. It's slow, clumsy work. The logs don't fit right. Every joint has to be notched by hand, and every notch has to be chipped, then checked, then chipped again until it sits just close enough. Not tight. Nothing out here is ever tight, but close enough means the wind won't rip through and chill you to the bone while you sleep. This cabin will be small, barely one room, but it's going to stand taller than your sodi. You're a little jealous. There's something about log walls that just feel more like home. It cacks less, has corners, Looks like something out of a storybook. But then you notice the spaces between the logs, finger-wide gaps you could practically read a newspaper through. You press your glove against one and feel the icy wind slice right through. You both know those gaps won't fix themselves. That's where chinking comes in. Mud, clay, straw, moss, whatever you can scrub. You smear it thick into every crevice like a cold weather cork, pressing it in with your hands until it holds. It freezes instantly, like frosting a cake with concrete. Sometimes people use ashes. One guy nearby even tried a mix with cow dung, which apparently works great if you don't mind the smell of summer on a July barn floor. You glance at your neighbor. He's lost a few fingers to frostbite. You notice now two on his left hand, blackened stubs just peeking out from a worn glove. It hits you hard. Not everyone makes it through their first winter. Not whole, anyway. Last season, a boy froze trying to reach the outhouse, got turned around in a blizzard just steps from the door. They found him curled up under the wagon, stiff as stone. That thought stays with you as you finish stacking the logs. Your breath fogs out in steady bursts, your bone tired, arms buzzing from effort. But when the last beam is laid, it feels almost good. Like building something out here isn't just survival. It's a little rebellion. A flick of the finger at the blizzard that's always waiting. You're invited inside for a mug of hot chori brew. It's not coffee, not really, but it's close enough when heated and sipped slowly. You both sit on upturned crates and listen to the logs settle with a groan. He talks about plans for a loft for real windows one day, maybe even glass if he can trade for it. But for now, it's oiled paper and hope. Glass, that's a luxury out here. Back east, you could get window panes for cheap. But on the frontier, a single sheet of glass is rarer than fresh fruit in January. Most folks use stretched greased paper soaked in lard or bare fat, then tacked over the frame. It lets in light, but not much else. You've seen it flutter in the wind like a ghost's breath, and when it tears, good luck finding a replacement. As you walk home, the cold is a little deeper. Your cheeks burn, but your muscles feel used in a good way. You pass the few landmarks that guide you, the twisted cottonwood, the half-sk wagon, the fence that doesn't quite line up. There are no roads here, just ruts, tracks, and memory. The snow's already covering your footprints. It always does. Back in your own soda, the kids are trying to make snow cream with what little milk you have. Your wife humors them, though you can tell she's worried about rationing. You offer the last bite of jerky and take off your coat. The house smells like damp wool and smoke, but it's still standing. That's something. Later, you sit by the stove, flipping through the one tattered almanac you've read 6 times already. Your daughter curls up next to you, blanket over her head, whispering about how the wind sounds like wolves. And she's not wrong. The house groans as the gusts roll through loud and low. You both listen. There's comfort in it now. Not peace exactly, but recognition. There's one scholarly debate you remember from a book long ago about whether frontier families were truly more resilient or just more desperate. Sitting here listening to the wind and feeling the ache in your shoulders, you're not sure it matters. Either way, you're still here. You close your eyes for just a moment, letting the fire warm your toes. Tomorrow you'll patch the roof again, reinforce the south wall, maybe even build a windbreak if you can find enough brush. But tonight, you made it through another day, and sometimes that's enough. The windows are the weak spot. You wake to the sound of the oiled paper flapping wildly in its frame, like a frantic bird trying to escape. It's still dark, but already the wind is pressing in with a kind of furious persistence that makes the walls tremble just slightly, barely noticeable, unless you're lying there, awake and listening, which you are. Your wife's breathing slow beside you, the kids curled in their corner beneath a pile of patched quilts, unaware that one corner of their world is coming unglued. You sit up and swing your legs over the edge of the bed, toes instantly numb. The stove is down to glowing embers, and you tiptoe across the packed dirt floor to toss on some splinters and one of the precious dry logs you've been hoarding. Fire sputters reluctantly, reluctant to live, and you crouch in front of it until it starts to pop and catch. You don't even bother putting on your boots before moving to the window. You press your palm to the edge of the frame. Cold seeps through. The paper covering the opening is torn, just a small split in the middle, but it's enough. Wind whistles through it like a cracked flute. You lean in and get a face full of frost-laced air for your trouble. Cursing softly, you fetch the repair kit. Just a bundle of tacks, a small hammer, and a piece of spare oilcloth that's stiff from the cold. You crouch, teeth clenched as you drive in the tacks with numb fingers. The hammer's too big for this kind of job, but it's all you've got. Every time you swing it, you flinch a little. Not from fear of missing, but because the wood frame itself is so fragile, you're worried it might crack wide open. When the tear is patched and the cloth drawn taut again, the room feels instantly calmer. It's not warm, not even close, but the biting draft is dulled and the fire is catching its rhythm. You sit back on your heels, watching the flames flicker, and realize this tiny moment, repatching a fake window in a fake wall, is the most control you felt in days. Windows out here aren't windows in the way you used to think of them. They're holes, really. Holes with dreams. Back home, you had glass and curtains, and that feeling of looking out while still being inside. Now, light is a risk. Anything that opens to the outdoors is a point of failure. Most folks don't even bother with real window frames. They just cut an opening in the wall and cover it with whatever they can find. Oiled paper is the standard. It's cheap, sort of transparent. If you stretch it tight enough and rub it with enough lard, it lets in a soft golden glow during the day. But it tears always, and when it tears, the cold rushes in, like it's been waiting for the smallest excuse. You heard about one guy, new settler, came in with money, who had a full pane of glass shipped from St. Paul, wrapped in wool and pine shavings, tucked inside a padded crate. It broke the first week when a blizzard threw a branch at it. Didn't even last long enough for him to brag. Now he's got paper and lard like the rest of you. The scholarly debate that flickers in your mind sometimes, because yes, you still think like someone who used to read books, has to do with light and psychology. There's talk that lack of sunlight contributes to what folks call prairie madness, cabin fever, deep yawning gloom. Some families go whole weeks without seeing more than a dull gray rectangle through their window hole. And when it storms, nothing, just blackness, a sealed-in feeling that presses down like an extra roof. And when the light does get in, it changes everything. On those rare clear mornings, when the sky turns pale blue and the prairie glows under a fresh crust of snow, the inside of the Saudi feels like a cathedral. Golden beams streaming through the oily paper, catching on every bit of soot and smoke, illuminating the packed walls like stained glass. The kids sit in it like cats, faces tilted up, quiet for once. You sit with them, not speaking, just watching the light shift and trying not to think about how temporary it is. But today's not one of those days. By mid-morning, the wind has picked up again and snow has started to fall sideways. You hear it before you see it. Tiny needles scratching against the walls like fingernails on a drum. You peek outside and get nothing but white. Not fog, not even snow, exactly, just white. The barn, 20 paces away, is already gone, swallowed whole. Your wife bundles the kids tighter and you check the stovepipe to make sure it's not blocked. That's another danger. Snow packing into the chimney, forcing smoke back down into the room. You don't need a reminder of what carbon monoxide does. Last month, a family 2 miles over passed out while the snow piled on their roof. They never woke up. When neighbors finally dug them out, the inside of their house was coated in soot, a frozen black tomb. You catch yourself staring at your own children. They're playing now, making up stories with pieces of firewood and rags. To them, this is just another day, another storm. They haven't yet learned what the wind means or how fast it can change. You set about reinforcing the windows just in case the patch doesn't hold. You tack up a second layer of cloth, then push a crate of dried potatoes against the wall beneath it. It's not much, but it'll slow down any draft that sneaks in. The potatoes, by the way, are freezing. You can feel it when you touch the sacks. But stacked like this, they serve two purposes: insulation and food security. Though if it gets much colder, they'll turn to mush, and if that happens, you're in real trouble. Late in the afternoon, the wind starts to scream. It rattles every seam, tests every wall, pokes at every floor in your little structure. You listen to it from your chair, sharpening a dull knife with slow, deliberate strokes. Your wife sits across from you, mending a sock, her fingers moving with practice speed. Neither of you speaks much during storms. There's nothing to say, only things to do and things to wait for. By evening, the storm is in full swing. The window patch is holding for now, but the wall below it is damp and the edges have started to curl. You add another layer of mud around the frame, smoothing it with your hands. It's ugly and it smells like wet dirt and oil, but you don't care. If it keeps the cold out, it's beautiful. You sit back down by the fire and the kids come close. One on each side, bundled in wool and linen, cheeks red from cold and play. The storm howls outside, furious that it can't get in. For the moment, you've won. You're starting to hear it now. Something different in the wind. Not just the high, thin scream you've grown used to, but a deep, groaning sound above your head. It's subtle at first, low like the belly of a drum, but you know what it means. The roof is struggling. You can feel it in the air, the heaviness pressing down. You look up and watch a thin stream of dirt shake loose from one of the crossbeams and sprinkle down like brown snow. Not a lot, not yet, but enough to make your gut twist. You move carefully, quietly, not wanting to alarm the kids who are still playing with bits of charred wood like they're soldiers. Your wife notices, though. She glances at you, then up at the ceiling, her face calm, but her eyes sharp. She's already thinking the same thing. The roof's packed sod, thick slabs of turf, laid over split poles, then weighted with snow. All that dirt, all that ice now turning wet and heavy with the Thor freeze-thaw cycle that never seems to end. It's a slow-motion avalanche waiting to happen, and you're living underneath it. You grab the long pole, your roof tester. You jam it upward gently, pushing at the ceiling from the inside to test for soft spots. Nothing moves at first, but then near the center, the pole sinks in just slightly before hitting something solid. Your throat tightens. That spot was firmer yesterday. People don't really talk about what happens when a sod roof collapses. It's not like a cave-in of rock. It's worse in a way. Suffocating, muddy, and unpredictable. You once heard about a family who lost a child under a roof failure. The kid was sleeping in the corner, and they didn't even know he was gone until hours later after digging through wet turf with their bare hands. You remember that story a little too vividly right now. You get to work. First, you bring in the support logs, thin tree trunks stripped of bark, saved for emergencies, just like this. You wedge one beneath the soft spot, jamming it between floor and roof, and hammer it into place. It groans in protest, but holds. You do the same on the other side. Every added support makes the room feel smaller, more like a mine shaft than a house. But you sleep better knowing the ceiling has bones now. Your wife helps you shift the sleeping area. You drag the kids' bedding away from the danger zone, tucking them into the farthest corner where the roof seems stable. They groan, not understanding, but comply. Then you both move the stove carefully over a few feet. It's heavy and awkward, and the stovepipe screeches as it drags against the hole in the wall. You worry about what this will do to the draft. A bad angle, and the smoke could start backing up, but for now, it's necessary. You go outside next, foolish maybe, but there's work to do. You wrap yourself in every coat and layer you own and push open the door. It groans on its hinges, crusted with frost. Snow hits your face immediately, sideways and sharp, biting into your cheeks like needles. You brace against the wind and make your way around the side of the house, boots vanishing into drifts. The roof's white, all right, covered in a heavy sheet of snow now beginning to slump in the middle. This is where the real work begins. You take your spade and start slicing at the snow atop the roof, carving trenches to allow runoff and pressure relief. It's slow, painful work. The wind howls and the ice fights you. Every shovel full feels like digging through sand with a spoon. You're soaked to the elbows in minutes. But you keep going because if you don't, the whole thing could come down. Your fingers start to go numb around the handle. That's when you remember what the older man at the trading post said. Snow's fine. It's melting snow that'll kill you. And here you are trying to remove it before it does just that. By the time you've cleared a 2 feet path along the top ridge, you're shaking. You climb down slowly. Not because you're afraid of slipping, though you are, but because you know if you fall now in this storm, you won't make it back inside without help. And there is no help, not out here. Back indoors, your wife wraps your hands in warm cloth and sets you by the stove. She doesn't say much, just looks at you with that mixture of irritation and admiration only frontier wives seem to master. You sit there shaking and steaming slightly as the warmth returns to your bones. Every joint aches. Your arms are dead weight. But you feel better knowing you shaved a little danger off the top of your house. The kids are quiet watching you with wide eyes. You smile to reassure them, though it probably looks more like a grimace. Then you pull out the almanac again, because you're still looking for patterns, a sign, anything that says the worst is over. Historically, this is the time of year when the snowpack builds. The middle stretch, the storms don't always kill, but they wear you down, one after another. The early homesteaders used to mark their walls with notches for every blizzard. You've started doing the same. There are 4 notches so far. This one will be 5. There's an old debate among survivalists, still argued even now, about whether it's better to build into the ground or above it. Sod homes, dugouts, semi-upturned shelters, all warmer, more insulated, but riskier when the roof fails. Above-ground cabins are colder, sure, but easier to reinforce. You don't care about the debate anymore. You care about this roof, these walls. Night falls and you're back to keeping watch. The kids sleep soundly. Your wife dozes lightly, curled under blankets, but you're up listening to the roof groan and shift. Every creak sounds like a promise or a threat. You pro the supports every hour, just a tap, just enough to know they're still holding. And they are for now. Eventually, exhaustion wins. You lean back in your chair, arms folded, boots by the stove, and let your eyes drift shut. You dream of sun, of spring, of green grass and warm wind, and a roof that doesn't need watching. But for tonight, you're still here. The roof didn't fall yet. You're starting to take a certain pride in the weird tricks. Those little hacks no one ever wrote down, but somehow everyone out here knows. One of the most important, chinking. The noble, thankless art of plugging every hole in your walls with anything that holds still long enough to be jammed into place. You think of it as a kind of ongoing argument between your house and the wind. And you, of course, are the exhausted referee with frostbitten fingers and a shovel full of mud that probably contains more manure than you'd like to admit. This morning, the wind woke you up early. It was polite about it, just a soft moan through a hairline crack in the southern wall. But once you heard it, you couldn't unhear it. That barely there whistle of cold air slipping in through some failed patch, carrying with it the unmistakable smell of snow. You sigh, pull on your boots, and grab the chinking bucket. It's half full of yesterday's mix. Straw, dirt, mud, and let's be honest here, a generous helping of chicken droppings. There's no shame in it anymore. You stopped caring what goes into the walls around week 3. You just want them to hold. You even heard someone say, cow pies make the best filler when dried. One of your neighbors swears by a special mixture of mud and wood ash. Another uses crushed up eggshells for strength, which you're pretty sure is just superstition. But hey, who are you to argue with anything that might keep your wall standing? You kneel beside the wall, freezing mud seeping through your gloves, and begin packing it into the gaps between the sod blocks. You press it in deep, fingers aching, thumbs numb. The trick you've learned is to go just a little beyond the surface. Find the gaps behind the gaps. That's where the cold lives. If you don't seal those, the draft will find you by nightfall. Inside the house, your wife's cooking mush again. She adds a pinch of dried berries for flavor, and the kids treat it like dessert. One of them is building something with sticks and twine, calling it a mouse trap. You're honestly impressed. You haven't seen a mouse in a few days, which is either a very good sign or a very bad one. They say when even the vermin vanish, it means something worse is coming. Back outside, you move to the east wall where the morning sun has just started to hit. It's weak, that sun, like it's coming through gores, but it melts the frost just enough to turn your mixture into usable glue. You smear it on with both hands, smacking it into place like you're frosting a cake with manure. Because in fact, you kind of are. One scholarly debate you remember from your youth, back when you were reading books and not mud patching houses, was whether these kinds of improvised homes were more functional than their fancier cousins. Some historians said sod houses were temporary, desperate things. Others argued they were marvels of environmental adaptation, perfectly suited to a treeless prairie and able to resist fire, cold, and time in ways a wooden structure never could. You lean toward the latter, not because you're romantic about it, but because yours is still standing. You think about adding more insulation inside, too. Some people tack up old quilts or scraps of canvas to the walls to create an air pocket, sort of like a second skin for the house. You've tried that in the sleeping area. Your wife even hung up a shawl between two nails to act as a wind barrier, and it actually works a little. Anything helps. One of your neighbors, old Mr. Coulson, swears by rabbit pelts. He lines his walls with them, catches them with snares, and strings them up like fuzzy wallpaper. It looks disturbing, but his house is warm, and that's worth a lot. You decide to try something similar. No pelts. You don't have enough, but you do have a stack of old grain sacks. You hang them against the coldest part of the wall, layering them with dry grass between each piece. It doesn't look like much, but you run your hand along it and feel the difference already. The wind is muffled, the draft's blocked. It feels like a win, a small one. But out here, those are gold. The kids help dragging bundles of grass and even some wool scraps to the corner. They're learning the language of survival without even knowing it. When your son spots a crack by the door and points it out with a matter-of-fact, "Cold lives here," you smile and nod. He's not wrong. After lunch, you move to the loft. It's barely a crawl space above the main room, just big enough to store food, tools, and sometimes one brave child who wants their own corner of the universe. The wind sneaks in up here more than anywhere else, so you check the seams where the sod meets the beam frame. Sure enough, there's a draft. You reach into the chinking bucket again and patch it with thick, muddy handfuls. There's something deeply strange about this whole process. You came out here to build a life, something better, something permanent, and yet every day you're not building up your patching, fixing, sealing. It's not the same thing, but it's close. It's enough to keep going. By evening, the wind begins to die down. It always does eventually. You sit by the stove, legs stretched out, nursing the last of the boiled coffee. It's bitter and thin, but you sip it like it came from the finest cafe in the world. Your wife sets a bowl of mush in front of you. This time, it has a sprinkle of cinnamon. You don't ask where she got it. Some secrets are better left as magic. The house is quieter now. The wind is still out there, still probing. But tonight, it's like you've managed to outsmart it. Just a little. The chinking is holding. The windows are patched. The roof support didn't groan once today. You take it all in. The glowing stove. The kids sprawled on the floor, drawing pictures in the dirt with sticks. The muffled sound of wind that no longer makes it inside. It's not paradise, but it is peace for now. You do one last walk before bed, lantern in hand, checking every wall, every corner. You prod the fresh chinking and smile, ugly as sin, but beautiful in its own way. Like a scar that means you lived through something. You crawl into bed, boots off, feet wrapped in spare socks, and pull the quilt up to your chin. Your wife's sigh beside you, the soft exhale of someone who's held everything together all day. And just before you fall asleep, you whisper into the dark, "Stay up there, roof. Just one more night." The stove. If there's one thing in this entire lopsided, mud-patched, frostbitten life that you love without hesitation, it's that stubborn cast iron stove. It's ugly, It's rusted. It clunks when you open the door like it's got arthritis. But it's also the heart of the house. Literally, without it, you'd all be dead. That's not hyperbole. That's just the math of frontier winters. You wake before dawn because the fire's out again. You always hope it'll last the night, and it never does. You keep trying little tricks, burying coals under ashes, stuffing the gaps with green wood to slow the burn, but the heat just doesn't stretch far enough. You swing your legs over the edge of the bed, boots waiting by the stove like loyal frozen soldiers, and you get moving. You've learned not to sit and brace yourself. The longer you wait, the colder you get. You move or you freeze. That's the equation. The stove feels dead when you touch it. No ember glow, just cold iron. You open the hatch and find a small ghost of heat, enough to coax a flame back with the right touch. You reach for the kindling, splintered fence rail from the last broken post and feed it into the belly of the beast. A little dried moss, a few curls of birch bark, someone traded you for 2 eggs. Strike flint. Spark. Come on, spark again. There. The fire catches like it's been sulking and finally changed its mind. Flame licks up and over the wood. Hungry and impatient, you fan it with a scrap of canvas until the whole thing breathes back to life. The stove cacks as it expands. You talk to it like an old mule. At a girl, stay with me. Your wife stirs under the quilt. She doesn't even open her eyes. She knows you've got it handled. That's the rhythm of things now. Whoever wakes first builds the fire. If you both sleep too long, you get punished for it. You throw in a few more sticks of precious wood, and that's when you realize you're nearly out. You stare at the wood pile. It was never impressive, but now it's truly pathetic. A few twisted branches, one thick knot of a log you've been avoiding because it burns too slow. You count it all with your eyes, doing that grim mental math you've come to know too well. This won't last 3 days. You're already burning furniture. You took apart the kid's small stool last week and fed it to the stove like it was just another pine branch. Now you're eyeing the empty storage crate in the corner. It squeaks when you sit on it. Anyway, firewood is firewood. People who've never lived through a prairie winter don't understand the sheer obsession settlers had with fuel. They think it's about the cold. It's not. It's about how quickly it becomes all you think about. Once the wood starts running low, your mind bends around it like a frozen compass needle. What burns? How long? Will it last the night? You've heard stories. Everybody has. One family burned their books. All of them. Even the Bible. Another chopped up their wagon tongue and nearly froze later because they couldn't haul anything in spring. Priorities shift when your toes go numb and the kids start coughing from the cold. You check the stove again. Still burning, still hungry. There's a bitterly funny historical footnote you remember reading in some yellowed frontier memoir. During one famously brutal winter, a preacher declared that God wouldn't forgive people who burned their sacred texts. The next week, he traded his hymnal for half a bundle of kindling. Turns out absolution doesn't heat a sod-house. Today's task is clear. You've got to find more wood. The sled is tied up out back, the runner half buried in snow. You spend an hour hacking it free. Your breath hitches in your chest as you pull it around to the front. The kids wave from the doorway, wool wrapped like little ghosts. You want to smile at them, but you don't. You don't want them to think this is normal, even though it is. The trip to the creek bottom isn't far, maybe half, a mile, but with the wind it feels endless. You trudge behind the sled, head down, scarf frozen stiff across your mouth. Your boots crunch through layers of snow, some drifted higher than your knees. It's the kind of walk that drains you, not because of the distance, but because of the cold's constant commentary. Every gust whispers, "You're too slow, you're too weak, turn back." But you don't. The creek bottom has what you need. Dead fall, scraps of cottonwood, dry limbs broken off by wind or time. Some are half frozen into the snow, but you wrestle them out like a dog digging up old bones. You pile the sled high. It doesn't look like much, but it's better than nothing. You even manage to find one thick branch that might burn through the night if split right. The return trip is worse. Every step is a negotiation. Your arms are raw. Your breath is shallow. You nearly trip twice. But when the sodi comes into view, you feel something close to victory. Your son cheers. The kids rush out and help unload, dragging sticks inside like trophies. You don't stop them. Let them feel proud. That night, the stove is fed well. It growls happily, glowing with a kind of smug heat. You all gather close. Your wife bakes something flat and brown on the stovetop. Oat cakes, maybe. She adds salt and something sweet, and the kids act like it's Christmas. You stretch out beside the fire, letting it toast your feet through 2 pairs of socks. The stove pops and sigh and you smile. It's working. She's working. That stubborn iron soot-covered beast of a stove is holding the whole world together. The funny part, no one appreciates these stoves in the history books. They talk about wagons, rifles, land claims, and manifest destiny, but not the stoves. Not the metal box that made it possible to not die in the middle of a frozen nowhere. You think about the firewood again, how long it'll last, where the next batch will come from. The crate in the corner, still a candidate. The broom handle, maybe. It's always a balance, survival versus future usefulness. And the fire, patient but demanding, will take it all if you let it. Later, as everyone sleeps and the house finally stops creaking, you feed the stove one last log. It flickers, then glows strong. You pat its side like an old dog and whisper, "Good girl." Because out here, fire isn't just warmth, it's life. The roof cacks again that night, not a groan this time. Something sharper, more distinct, like a heavy sigh through a rotten board. You jolt awake before your eyes are even open, already aware of the sound. That particular pitch drills into your spine like a claw. It's the kind of noise you can't ignore. Not when you've been living under a few thousand pounds of dirt and snow for months. You sit up fast, heartbeat loud, breath fogging in the dim orange flicker of the stove's last few embers. One of the kids stirs and turns over, mumbling something about his boots. It's hard to tell in the dark, but the ceiling looks heavier. Maybe it's just your imagination, or maybe the weight really has shifted. Either way, you're not risking it. Not tonight. You quietly get up, dress in layers, and tap your wife on the shoulder. Her eyes open instantly. You don't need to say anything. She hears it too. You both look at the ceiling like it's an animal ready to pounce. Then, in calm but practiced rhythm, you start moving. You're going to the root cellar. The kids blink sleepily as you help them into their boots and coats. No one cries. That stopped months ago. They're alert in that eerie, quiet way children get when they know something is wrong, but aren't sure how wrong. Your wife wraps the baby in 2 quilts and carries her. And you open the trapdoor in the corner. Cold air rushes up like a ghost. The root cellar isn't exactly comfortable. It smells of mildew and onions and the earthy funk of old potatoes. But right now, it's safety. The cellar is small, dug out into the hillside before the Sod-House was even finished. You carved it with a spade in clay, so stiff it bent the blade more than once. The ceiling is barely tall enough to sit upright, and wooden shelves line the dirt walls. Most of what they once held is long gone. Just a few shriveled turnips, a jar of pickled eggs, and a sack of flour with a mouse hole chewed through the bottom. But you didn't build it for comfort. You built it for nights like this. You and your wife settle the children on the ground, bundling them against the dirt wall and covering them with blankets and a burlap grain sack. You wedge yourself into the far corner with the lantern. Its glow just strong enough to keep the shadows from swallowing the space whole. The baby lets out a soft hiccup, but doesn't cry. Not even she wants to test fate. Above you, the wind starts up again, hard this time. You can hear it clawing at the house like a desperate thing, followed by a deep thump. Snow falling from the roof or part of the roof falling in. You don't know, and you don't want to find out just yet. You stay in the cellar for hours. It's hard to track time down here. The lantern flickers and dims, and you keep checking the oil level like it might magically refill itself. Your wife nods off briefly, head on your shoulder, one arm still cradling the baby. The older kids whisper, trading ghost stories in that half-scared, half-excited way that kids do when real fear is too heavy to name. One story stands out, a true one. Supposedly, A family outside of Vermilion, so the tale goes, had their house collapsed under a blizzard just like this. Trapped inside, they dug their way out using a skillet. Took 3 days. When they finally broke through, they were 10 feet below the surface. Snow had swallowed the prairie whole. Whether that story is true doesn't matter right now, because down here, with the house groaning above you and the fire snuffed out, you believe it could happen. Your legs go numb long before morning. You shift quietly, trying not to wake anyone, and pull your coat tighter. The air is damp and cold, but not freezing. That's something. That's what the root cellar is good for. It never freezes. It doesn't get warm either, but in the middle of a storm, that stability is worth everything. There's an odd comfort in it, being tucked away in the earth like this, like a mole or a seed waiting for spring. You think about how early settlers lived in dugouts, actual homes built fully underground. No walls above ground at all, just a door and maybe a stovepipe sticking out of a hill. Some claim they were warmer than Sod-House. You can see why. You've read the debates. Some scholars say the early dugouts were too damp and eventually fell apart. Others argue they were smarter, safer. You've always wondered if you should have dug deeper, built lower. But then you remember the flooding last fall. 3 inches of rain turned the root cellar into a muddy pit for days. If you'd built the whole house into the ground, you'd be swimming every time it thawed. Eventually, the wind lets up. Not all at once, more like a tantrum winding down. The howling quiets into something closer to a sigh. You listen carefully, holding your breath at every creak from above. When a full hour passes without any more crashes or groans, you decide to check. You climb up slowly, one hand on the ladder, the other holding the cold lantern. You push open the trapdoor and a cloud of dust and cold rushes in. The room is still silent. No obvious collapse. You step out cautiously, eyes scanning every corner. The ceiling above the stove has a crack running through it now, long and jagged like a scar, and a heap of dirt lies in the far corner. Not catastrophic, but not nothing either. You sigh and brush dust from your coat. Another patch job to add to the list. You light the stove again with the last of the birch bark, and the fire catches, stubborn but willing. The warmth spreads slowly like ink in water. You call down to your wife and help the kids climb up one by one, their cheeks pink, their eyes wide and tired. The house smells like damp earth, wood smoke, and potatoes now. Oddly comforting, like you've come through something ancient and been spat back out. You sweep the dirt into a bucket and inspect the cracked ceiling. It's ugly, but it's holding. Later, after you've remedied the worst of the damage and the stove is burning strong again, you catch your wife's eye. She gives you a tired smile and says, "We should sleep down there more often." You laugh quietly, because she's not wrong. It comes without warning. No polite flutter of snowflakes, no dark clouds gathering on the horizon like a theater curtain being drawn. Just sudden, violent white. One moment you're outside walking the short path to the barn with a bucket in one hand and your coat half bebuttoned. The next, the world disappears, white everywhere horizontal. The wind isn't blowing, it's ripping, screaming. You can't see the barn, you can't see the house. You can't see your hand if you hold it out in front of your face, which you do for reasons you can't even explain. Just to confirm you're still there. The air turns solid. It feels like standing inside a snow globe during an earthquake. You drop the bucket. That was a mistake. The clatter vanishes instantly, sucked into the storm. You don't even hear it hit the ground. All sound is flattened, smothered. The snow pelts you sideways with tiny needle-sharp ice shards, each one a slap to your face, your neck, your eyes. You turn around, or at least you think you do, and walk back the way you came. Or maybe not. The snow erases direction. Up, down, forward, back. It's all the same now, a swirling white blindness. And then panic arrives, not all at once. It creeps in slowly, disguised as a question. How far did I walk? Then another. Was that 5 steps or 20? Your stomach drops as the storm presses against your chest like a heavy hand. You tell yourself not to panic. You know better. You know this is how people die. 20 steps from their own back door, frozen solid with their key still in their hand. You stop moving. You force yourself to breathe. Think there was a fence post to your left or maybe behind you. You reach out blindly. Nothing. Then something hard, vertical, a post, a shovel. You fumble at it. Wood. It's the corner of the barn. Relief hits like a fever. You press against it, knees weak, and trace your hand along the wall until you find the door. It opens with a scream you can barely hear over the wind. Inside, the air is still freezing, but at least it's not moving. You slam the door shut behind you and collapse onto the floorboards. Your heart doesn't slow for a while. The barn smells like hay and manure and old leather. The animals are restless. The cows grunt softly, and the mule stomps in the far stall, his breath steaming in the darkness. You forgot the lantern. Of course you did. You sit there, snow melting down your back, and thank whatever force of nature let you reach this far. You don't go back to the house. Not yet. You know better now. There's no walking through that. Not unless you want your name added to the long, grim list of settlers who vanished on their own property. One of your neighbors told a story, probably exaggerated, about a man who tied a rope from his door to the barn so he could feed his livestock during storms. One day, he let go of the rope halfway and was never seen again. They found his body in spring, curled up behind a drift just yards from his porch. You once thought that was ridiculous. Now, sitting on the cold barn floor, shaking snow from your sleeves, you don't think it's funny anymore. You grab an old saddle blanket and wrap it around your shoulders, shivering as your sweat cools. There's nothing to do but wait. Back in the house, your wife is probably pacing, wondering where you are. Or maybe she already suspects you're holed up with the mule, waiting out the worst of it. Either way, you know she's handling things. She always does. Still, you imagine her face framed in firelight. That particular tension in her jaw she gets when the storm starts whispering through the walls. Time loses shape in the barn. You sit for a while, then lie down in the hay. The animals settle, and the storm rages on just beyond the thin wooden walls. You try to rest, but your body's too alert. Every gust makes the barn creak and shift like an old man's joints. You hear one of the cows lie down heavily, grumbling like she's just as annoyed by all of this as you are. Eventually, the light changes. Not that you can see it. There are no windows in the barn, but something shifts in the air. That subtle pressure drop you've learned to read like a barometer. The wind softens. The silence feels suspicious at first, like a trick, but then it holds. You wait 10 more minutes just to be sure. When you finally step outside, the storm is gone. Not eased up, not faded, gone, like someone turned off the sky. The air is still and hushed. Snow lies draped across everything in soft, deceptive mounds, glittering under the returning light. The prairie is unrecognizable, the path to the house gone, the fence a memory. Everything is white and clean and deadly. You walk carefully, trying to gauge where the house might be. You've done this before, played the guess where my home is game. Only now you're carrying the fresh weight of near disaster in your chest. You scan for the chimney, the roofline, a corner, anything. And then you see it, a faint plume of smoke in the distance, curling up from behind a drift. You trudge toward it. The snow gives way underfoot, sinking to your knees in places. You find the house, not by sight, but by touch. Your boot hits the porch step, buried beneath the snow. You dig it out with your hands, ignoring the sting in your fingers. Inside, the heat hits you like a wall. Your wife rushes to meet you, half angry, half relieved, pulling you inside and brushing snow off your coat while muttering something about stubborn mules. You being the mule in this case. You sit near the stove, steam rising from your clothes, and sip a tin cup of hot water that tastes vaguely of old herbs and wood smoke. The kids sit cross-legged, wide-eyed, waiting to hear what the storm was like. You don't say much. Just shake your head and say, "Don't ever go out in a whiteout." They nod solemnly, as if they already knew. Later that night, you nail a piece of twine from the front door to the barn. You're not too proud to take the lesson. Some say prairie blizzards have a sound, like a train or a scream or a choir of ghosts. Some say they're silent killers. Both are true. You've heard the scream, and now you've heard the silence after. You shovel for 3 days straight, The snow from that last storm didn't just blanket the prairie, it smothered it. The drifts climbed taller than the windowsills, thick and crusted with ice, hard as cured leather in the morning and slushy by midday. Your arms ache in new creative ways. Every motion is a negotiation between exhaustion and necessity. You have to dig, not because anyone will admire your nice, clean path, but because your livestock are buried. Somewhere under all this white is a cow that hasn't moved in 2 days. The barn's half submerged. You shovel a narrow tunnel toward it, like some desperate badger clawing through the snow. By the time you reach the sidewall, you're sweating under 4 layers, and the steam from your own breath fogs up your scarf. You've started naming the snowbanks because at this point, they've become part of the family. The one blocking the barn is all stubborn, the one sealing in the priv's bad decision. You mutter at them as you dig. You finally reach the barn door on the second day. The drift packed against it is so dense you have to use the back of your axe to chip it free. When you pry the door open, a flood of snow collapses inward. You wade through it, cursing, and step into a world gone strangely quiet. The animal survived, barely. The mule looks at you like he's owed an apology, and he probably is. The cows are stiff, their backs coated in frost. One of them has an icicle hanging from her ear. You move through the barn fast, checking nostrils for breath, rubbing stiff joints, throwing down fresh hay that you really didn't want to use this early in the season. The milk cow hasn't been milked in 2 days, and you know that's asking for mastitis. You get to work trying not to flinch when the tepid milk hits the pail with a sad little plink. There's no feed left in the usual bin. You used the last of it before the storm hit, thinking you had another day or two. So now you open the emergency cache. Old cornmeal, dried oats, anything halfway edible. You chop frozen root vegetables into chunks with a hatchet and hope the livestock aren't too picky. The cow eyes are turnip-like, it's offended by the shape, but eventually chew it down. That's the thing you don't think about until you've lived it. In a winter like this, your animals are just as likely to die from cold as they are from hunger, or both. You've heard horror stories, entire herds frozen where they stood, chickens stacked in the coop like firewood. A man near Jamestown found his pig dead in the snow with its eyes still open. The smarter families started building what they call covered connections, little hallways between the house and the barn, just enough shelter to make the trip survivable. You didn't have time to build one before winter came on full force, but you swear you will before next year. You add it to your mental list somewhere between don't ever let the fire die again and maybe it's time to get a second mule. Once the animals are fed and the worst of the drift is cleared from the barn roof, you turn your attention to the trail between buildings. You dig it out in long, narrow trenches, just wide enough for your shoulders. You can't shovel it all. It's too deep, too endless. But you make a snaking path from the barn to the house, from the house to the well, and from the house to the outhouse. Yes, the outhouse. That miserable wooden box out back, which now sits half swallowed by a snowbank and encased in a crust of wind-packed ice. You stand there, shovel in hand, considering your options. You remember what happened last time the path to it vanished. A desperate late-night trip in a storm. One hand on a rope, the other clutching your coat. That time you made it. Next time, maybe not. You dig it out, cursing every frozen inch. The scholarly debates around early homesteader hygiene never come up in dinner conversation, but if they did, you'd have a few things to say. Like how the real challenge wasn't keeping clean. It was finding the outhouse in a white out. Some folks just gave up and used chamber pots indoors, or when things got really bad, dug trenches inside the house. You'd rather not let it come to that. When the paths are finally clear, the sun is beginning to dip. You step back and look at the network of trenches you've carved, like a miniature city cut into a frozen wasteland. It's strangely satisfying. You've brought order to chaos, at least until the next storm buries it all again. Back inside, your wife already has water boiling. The children are playing some game involving buttons and twine, their laughter echoing off the earthen walls. You sit by the stove, legs stretched out, muscles humming. The fire feels good, earned. That evening, you break out the rope, the same one your neighbor once laughed at when you mentioned it. "I'm not some blind old fool," he'd said. "I can walk 20 feet in the snow." He's not laughing now. Not after last week when he got turned around trying to feed his chickens and ended up curled beside his well, nearly frozen stiff before his wife found him by sheer luck. You tie one end to the house's doorframe and walk it to the barn, knotting it around a post just inside. It's not elegant. It sags. It sways in the wind, but it's enough. You test it. Walk the length with your eyes closed. You reach the barn door. You do the same on the return trip. Success. The children call it the blizzard line, and they think it's funny, like a game of blind man's bluff. But you know better. You look at that sagging rope and see a lifeline, insurance against the white curtain that can fall in an instant and erase the world. You sleep that night with the wind rattling the window patch and the stove radiating a gentle, steady heat. In your dreams, you're back outside shoveling snow over and over. But instead of exhaustion, you feel calm, like each shovel full is a small victory. In the morning, you wake to quiet, real quiet. You lie there a long time, just listening to the blessed stillness and knowing it won't last. You've never appreciated fat quite like this before. Not when you were growing up. Not when you lived in the city for a spell. Not even when you were just starting your homestead and dreaming of lean, muscled years on the land. But now, out here, in this bitter, sharp-toothed winter that has stripped the color from your knuckles and made enemies of your own boots. Now, fat is your best friend. It begins with your wife smearing lard on the baby's cheeks. You'd always thought it was just some old wives' tale, like rubbing whiskey on gums for teething or hanging a horseshoe over the door to stop lightning. But she does it with quiet confidence, her fingers gentle as she dabs thick white grease onto the baby's pink skin. Stops the wind from chapping her, she says simply. And sure enough, the baby doesn't wail as much when they go outside for the fastest possible dash to the privy. Her skin stays soft, even while yours feels like it's turning to parchment. You try it yourself later skeptically. A little smear of lard on your cheekbones, your nose, the rim of your ears. You feel like a sausage. But when you head outside into the morning wind, the difference is shocking. The sting is blunted, the burn is dulled. You'd laugh if your face weren't frozen. Who knew the answer to surviving a blizzard was becoming a walking pie crust? It becomes a ritual. Every morning before chores, your wife warms the jar of lard near the stove and lines up the children like she's preparing them for war. Little red cheeks are dabbed with grease. Ears, too. Even their hands, when gloves are wearing thin, get a smear. You follow last in line, and by now you don't even argue. You just tilt your face. It's not just the lard. You're layering yourselves like onions these days. Wool, canvas, more wool, socks over socks. The kids sleep in so many layers, you're starting to forget what their actual shape is. Your wife makes a game of it. First one to put on 6 layers wins. Nobody wins, of course, but it keeps them moving. There's an old pair of woolen long johns you once mocked for being scratchy. Now you'd kill to keep them from disappearing. The threadbare scarf with a hole in it. A prized heirloom. You don't wash things anymore unless they're truly offensive. The smell of smoke and grease and whatever stew you had last week just clings to everything like a badge of honor. You could sniff the coat rack and guess the day, and still the cold gets in. You're inside when it hits again. Just a minor storm this time, not a full blizzard, but it's cold in a way that sinks. The kind that seeps through the wall no matter how much chinking you've packed in. The kids are under blankets doing schoolwork by candlelight, the baby asleep in a nest of rags. Your wife is boiling water just to add moisture to the air, which is dried into something that feels like sandpaper in your nose. That's when you remember the trick about bricks. You find an old one from the ruins of someone else's homestead, a corner chimney that never quite got built. You stick it in the oven, heat it up until it's nearly too hot to touch, then wrap it in a scrap of flannel and slip it under the blankets at the kids' feet. They squeal. grateful. The oldest looks at you like you just invented fire. There's a kind of creativity to survival. It isn't glamorous, it doesn't come with gold stars or rousing music, but it's real. You use lard on the skin, bricks for heaters. You stuff straw into the linings of the children's boots when they start complaining their toes burn, which you've learned is the body's way of saying about to go numb. You line their coats with pages from old newspapers, words printed 3 winters ago, now working as insulation. And still there are moments of danger. Your youngest son wanders outside one morning before dawn just to see what the snow looks like. He says barefoot, shirtless. You find him within minutes, thanks only to the blizzard rope, and drag him back inside, his feet already red and blotchy. You hold him by the fire for hours, rubbing warmth back in, muttering that he'll lose a toe. Maybe two, he doesn't, but the scare stays with you. It's not just cold, it's the kind of cold, the kind that makes metal brittle, that cracks wagon wheels and snaps bootlaces, the kind that takes breath away. Not poetically, but literally. You've stepped outside and had the hairs in your nose freeze solid in seconds. You've heard boards split in the middle of the night, the sound like gunshots echoing through your little soda. Every crack, every snap, every pop is a reminder. This season doesn't care about you. There's a fringe idea you once read in an old book. Something a trapper wrote about rubbing fat directly into his clothes, soaking them, letting them become like second skin. He claimed it kept out wind better than any wool. Your wife draws the line there. No one's sleeping next to a man who smells like a candle, she says. You quietly believe she's wrong, but you let it go. Around mid-inter, your neighbor comes by, looking half-frozen and wild-eyed. He's run out of fuel and food both, and the only reason he made it to your door is because he tied a large soaked rag around his face and shoved hay into his boots. He looks ridiculous, like a scarecrow that got dipped in grease. But he's alive, and that, you're realizing, the only measure that matters. You give him a place to sit by the stove and a cup of stew with a chunk of hard bread. No one talks much. He just eats. Then he leans back and falls asleep mid-sentence, snoring like someone who narrowly escaped something large and mean. The kids call him Mr. Candleman for days after. He doesn't mind. He stays 2 nights, then heads home with a sack of old clothes, a jar of lard, and a new respect for insulation that doesn't come from catalogs. That's the real education out here. It's not just how to chop wood or dig a snow tunnel. It's how to turn fat into armor, how to make a stove last with frozen corn husks, how to spot the difference between a red cheek and a frostbitten one. You go to sleep that night smelling faintly of pork. You don't mind. The stove is burning low but steady. The house is quiet, and the children's feet are warm beneath their brick and blanket contraptions. And as you drift off, you think, not for the first time, how strange it is that the thing keeping you alive is the same stuff you use to scrape off the top of soup and toss away. Fat is life now. The first time someone mentions the blizzard line, you laugh. It sounds like a joke, a nickname for some tragic old telegraph wire strung across the prairie, or maybe one of those invisible line settlers cross when they leave behind good sense in favor of stubbornness. But it's not. The blizzard line is literal. A rope, a thin, frayed lifeline from your front door to anywhere you might want to get to and back from without dying. You've already put one up, of course, from the soda to the barn. You tied it with thick knots and tested it in calm weather, eyes shut, one hand over the other like you were learning Braille. It worked. You laughed at yourself afterward, standing there in broad daylight, holding a rope to nowhere. But then came that white out, and suddenly you weren't laughing. You were gripping that rope like your life depended on it because it absolutely did. Now the idea spreads. One by one, your neighbors start adding their own blizzard lines. One woman ties hers from the kitchen to the well. Another strings a line to the woodshed so she can fetch logs in storms without vanishing. You hear someone went full spiderweb and mapped out their entire homestead in rope. It's for the children, they said, but everyone knows it's because they got lost going to the outhouse last week. You're expanding your own now. Today's task, adding a line to the smokehouse. It's only 20 paces from the back door, but 20 paces in the wrong storm might as well be 20 m. You unspool the line, an old hemp rope from your wagon supplies, and walk it out carefully. Your boots crunch through the crust of snow, the wind already teasing the edges of your coat, whispering its usual promises of getting worse soon. The smokehouse is barely more than a shed. A few boards nailed together, a pit dug into the floor, and hooks dangling like crooked teeth from a ceiling beam. It smells of salt and meat and faint desperation, like everything else these days. Inside, you still have some jerky, a side of pork that's half frozen and more precious than gold, and a few slabs of questionable meat that you're choosing not to think too hard about. As long as it doesn't smell bad, it's good. That's the new standard. You tie the rope around the smokehouse door handle, double knot it, then head back toward the house, pulling it taut as you go. You install guideposts along the way, makeshift stakes pounded into the frozen earth with a mallet you've already used to fix your boots and your nerves more than once. As you work, you realize this simple act, tying rope between buildings, is more than just survival. It's admission. You're not in control anymore. You're not mastering the land. You're surrendering to its terms and hoping it lets you crawl through the season with your fingers and dignity intact. There's an old debate among survivalists still buzzing through homesteader circles decades later about whether the blizzard line was a mark of preparedness or a symbol of fear. Was it smart or was it cowardly? You've decided it's neither. It's just reality. A man who scoffs at the rope might get buried in a drift. The man who respects it might live to laugh about how silly he looked, hand over hand, chasing a chicken through a storm while tethered like a ship's mast to his own front porch. Later that evening, you show the kids how it works. You tie a spare line around your daughter's wrist and let her walk the path to the barn in calm weather. She giggles the whole way, pretending she's lost at sea, shouting "land ho." When she reaches the barn wall, your son insists on trying it blindfolded. He bumps into the woodpile, trips over the sled, and still comes back grinning. To them, it's a game. You're glad for that. The real blizzard comes 2 nights later. It announces itself with silence, the kind that wakes you like a whisper in your ear. Then the sudden punishing thump of snow hitting the roof fast and hard like someone's throwing sacks of flour from the sky. You wake instantly. So does your wife. She's already getting the kids dressed. Not for evacuation, just for cold. When the wind howls like this, you prepare. The outhouse is the first casualty. You can't even see it by dawn, and you're not going to go looking. The barn is holding, but the path to it is lost under a waist-deep drift. You step outside with the rope in your hand and go in slow and steady like you're walking on the moon. The wind shoves you sideways. You pull back against it, holding to the line with both hands, snow crusting your eyebrows, freezing the hairs in your nose in an instant. You reach the barn. The animals are shivering. You throw down hay, break the ice in the water buckets with a hammer, mutter apologies to the mule who looks more annoyed than scared. You work fast, heart-pounding, because every second out here feels like theft. The rope trembles in the wind like it might snap at any moment. You return to the house on instinct and muscle memory. You slip once, your foot catches on something under the snow, maybe a buried tool or an old board, and you nearly let go of the rope. Nearly, but your hand holds. You make it back. You're covered in ice and bruised, but you're alive. Inside, the house feels sacred, warm somehow, even if the fire's barely crackling. Your wife pulls snow from your eyebrows and says nothing. You just nod. Later, you eat jerky by candlelight and stare at the loop of rope coiled near the door like a sleeping dog. It saved you, that dumb, frayed, tar-stiffened line. It's the difference between surviving and disappearing into the white. A week passes. The snow doesn't melt. The sun barely rises. But you've made peace with the rope. You check it every morning. You teach the kids to use it one-handed with their eyes closed. You string up new ones when the path shifts. And you stop laughing at the name. It's not a joke anymore. It's not a blizzard line. It's a lifeline. The first time you use potatoes as insulation, it's almost a joke. You've run out of everything else. No more straw, no old quilts left to tack to the wall, and the wind has found a new path in a quiet hiss behind the stacked crates near the stove. You crawl down to the root cellar looking for anything at all that might plug the draft. You were hoping maybe a sack of dried corn husks or some split firewood you'd forgotten. But instead, you find potatoes, dozens of them, cold, still firm, covered in a thin crust of dirt and half-sprout-outed eyes curling like spider legs. You stare at them for a long moment, and then because it's winter and your standards have vanished like your last clean pair of socks, you start hauling them upstairs. Your wife sees you lugging a sack into the house and raises an eyebrow. You meet her look and say, "We're going to see if starch stops the cold." To her credit, she doesn't argue. You start stacking them along the base of the wall, right where the draft is coming through. Not tight, not fancy, just sack after sack of potatoes pressed shoulder to shoulder like sleepy soldiers. You lay one row flat, then stack another on top. A kind of improvised bunker of root vegetables. It looks ridiculous. It smells vaguely of earth and must. But when you press your hand against the air above them, the breeze is gone. You've done it. You've built a potato wall. And so begins a new chapter in your winter survival, one where produce becomes architecture. You've heard of settlers using snow to block out wind. You've heard of people hanging pelts, stuffing rags soaked in animal grease into holes, even building windbreaks out of old wagon wheels. But no one told you about potatoes. Maybe because no one thought to try. Or maybe they did and were too embarrassed to tell anyone. Either way, it works. You reinforce your success by stuffing loose straw between the sacks, then tacking a few boards across the top to keep the wall from falling over if someone trips. The next morning, the room is noticeably warmer. Not a lot, maybe 2 degrees, but 2 degrees means you don't wake up with frost on the inside of your nose. You take that as a win. The kids get involved next. They start stacking their own little barricades in their sleeping corners, smaller versions of your Spud fortress. Your daughter builds a potato fort behind the stove and declares it her royal castle. You don't stop her. Let her play. Let her pretend this is fun. That she's warm because she's clever, not because you're running out of real insulation. You start thinking more seriously about heat conservation. The stove is good, but it's greedy. You've learned to feed it just enough to keep the room above freezing. Any more, and you're burning through wood too fast, so you seal off sections of the house, hang blankets over doorways, push crates and barrels against known draft points, even rearrange furniture to create wind buffers. Your home becomes a maze of makeshift insulation, a potato-lined labyrinth where every wall has been repurposed as defense against the cold. Your wife hangs an old coat across the door, double-layered with rags stitched into the lining. The wind still finds a way through, but now it comes in like a whisper instead of a slap. You keep an eye on the potatoes, of course. You rotate the sacks every few days to keep them from freezing on one side and turning to mush on the other. It's a balance. If they freeze solid, you lose your wall and your food. But if they get too warm, they'll sprout or rot. Either way, they're not just food anymore. They're building material, temperature regulators, and at night, makeshift seats for the kids. There's a quirky historical theory you remember, something one of your teachers once said in passing. Some archaeologists believed early Scandinavian settlers used packed food as insulation. Meat, grains, root vegetables, anything dense enough to hold back the cold. No one ever proved it. But now, sitting beside your potato barricade, you think maybe they were onto something. You don't need proof. You've got living, starchy evidence in your living room. One night, a sack bursts. Too much pressure, maybe, or just bad luck. You wake to the sound of something rolling across the floor and bolt upright, half convinced the roof is caving in, but it's just a rogue potato making its slow, clunky escape across the room. Your son mumbles in his sleep, then says, "It's trying to get warm too," and rolls over. You laugh quietly so as not to wake them all, but a real laugh, first one in days. Still, Not everything is charming. You check the wall behind the potatoes on the fifth day and find a wet patch. A slow leak, snow melting through the outer sod. The potatoes are absorbing some of it, like sponges. You peel away a few sacks and find two that have gone soft and discolored. They smell not great. You remove them, replace them with drier ones, and adjust your setup to keep the moisture off the back row. Later that week, you trade a jar of pickles for a spare canvas tarp from a neighbor. You hang it between the wall and the potato stack, hoping it'll keep future meltwater from turning your insulation into soup. Your wife is skeptical. "How many uses do you think we can find for a single potato?" she asks one night. You think about it. Food, insulation, ballast, paperweight, doors stop, toy, possibly a weapon in a pinch. "At least 6, you say." She snorts. "If we make it to spring, I'm never eating one again." You nod in agreement, but deep down you know you will. There's comfort in the familiar, and these spuds are as familiar as it gets. They've kept you fed, warm, and surprisingly entertained. You end the night checking the wall again. The sacks are holding, the room is warm, and the wind is outside where it belongs. For now, the potato wool stands. You wake up coughing, deep, dry, acrid. The kind of cough that doesn't belong to illness, but to something fouler, thicker smoke. You blink hard, eyes burning, and when they finally open, you see it. A gray, swirling haze curling through the room like a lazy ghost. It stinks of soot and ash, and it hangs low across the ceiling like a warning. For a moment, you're confused. The fire was low when you went to sleep, carefully banked under a crust of ash to keep the coals alive for morning. But now the air tastes like a chimney. Something's wrong. You throw off the quilt and stumble toward the stove, waving one arm in front of your face, like that's going to help. The iron door is still shut, but there's barely any flame visible through the slits in the front. The fire isn't roaring, it's suffocating. Your wife is already up holding the baby to her chest and pressing a wet rag over the child's nose. The other kids are stirring, groggy and confused, rubbing their eyes and coughing too. Your throat scratches like sandpaper. You glance toward the stovepipe and feel a lurch in your stomach. It's cold. It shouldn't be cold. Not when there's heat in the stove. That means one thing: the chimney is blocked. Snow or ice or both. Somehow the flue has frozen shut, and now the smoke has nowhere to go but back inside. You grab the poker and crack open the stove door. Smoke bellows out like breath from a dragon, making you stagger back, eyes watering. The fire inside is a pitiful thing, starved of oxygen and choking on its own fumes. You slam the door, again, and pull your coat on over your nightshirt. "I'll climb up," you rasp. Your wife starts to protest. Of course she does. But there's no time for arguing. The room's already unbreathable. If the chimney doesn't clear soon, you'll have to douse the fire entirely. And if you do that, you'll have frostbite before dawn. Outside is worse than you expected. The cold hits like a slap, hard, brutal. Sharp-edged wind claws at your face as you climb onto the crate beside the house and begin to scale the side of the soda. The roof, thankfully, is crusted over just enough to hold your weight. You crawl, half sliding toward the stovepipe, dragging yourself along like a soldier under fire. When you reach it, the pipe is coated in ice. The cap is completely encased, frozen solid. No wonder the smoke has nowhere to go. You pull out your knife and start chipping at the ice. Every scrape of metal against metal, sending a screech through the air that's probably waking up your neighbors if they aren't already up dealing with their own chimneys. It takes 10 minutes, maybe more. You lose feeling in your fingers before you're halfway done. Your nose runs, then freezes. Your teeth chatter so hard it feels like they might splinter. But finally, a chunk of ice breaks free and warm smoke bursts out of the pipe in a sudden hot whoosh that hits you square in the face. You breathe it in, grateful and gagging all at once. The pipe is open. The house can breathe again. You crawl back down like your joints are made of rust. Inside, the smoke is already thinning. Your wife has opened the door and is waving a blanket to fan the air. The kids are huddled under layers, looking pale and wide-eyed. You smile at them through a mouthful of soot and say, "Chimney's clear." No one laughs, but you didn't expect them to. Once the smoke clears out enough to see straight, you rebuild the fire carefully, watching as the flames snap and curl up into the now functioning pipe. You open the door a few times just to reassure yourself. Yes, the draft is pulling again. The stove is breathing like it's supposed to. You sit down hard, legs shaking, and wrap your hands around a mug of warm water. No tea, no coffee, just warmth. That's all you're after. Now, this isn't the first time you've heard of blocked chimneys, but it's the first time it's nearly gotten you. You remember a story someone told back at the general store? An older couple house filled with smoke overnight. They didn't wake up. Or maybe they did, just too late to do anything about it. People focus on blizzards, frostbite, getting lost. But carbon monoxide, that's the quiet killer. No warning, no mercy. Just sleep then. Nothing. You and your wife agree to check the chimney every evening now. No exceptions. It becomes part of the nightly ritual. Bank the fire, bar the door, knock the pipe. You tap it with a stick and listen for the hollow ring of airflow. When it sounds blocked, you know what to do. Sometimes the kids beat you to it. You hear them knock it themselves during their pretend games. Make sure the smoke can go. Your younger says solemnly, like it's a sacred rite. You even talk about building a better chimney, one that won't freeze. Some folks in town have started experimenting with rock-lined flue or putting small metal cages over the top to catch snow before it clogs the hole. One guy swears by stuffing a warm brick into the base of his pipe before bed to keep ice from forming. You file all these ideas away for spring, assuming you get that far. There's an old fringe idea you remember hearing from a trader passing through, a theory that prairie settlers should stop using vertical chimneys altogether. Build it sideways, he said. Let the smoke out low under the wind. You laughed at the time. Now you wonder. But for now, it's your job to keep the pipe clear, the fire alive, the air breathable. The wind howls that night like it knows it almost got you, like it's circling back, trying to find another weakness. But you're ready. You knock the pipe one more time. Listen for the echo and settle under your quilt. Your nose still singed from smoke, but your lungs finally clear. No one talks much about that night in the days that follow, but you can feel its presence. The kids stay close to the stove. Your wife watches the ceiling when the fire crackles too high. You sleep a little lighter, and every morning before the sun rises, you get up and knock the chimney once, twice, 3 times just to be sure. You don't see the neighbors for 12 days. That's not unusual out here. Not when the snow stacks up high enough to bury fences and the wind carves the roads into winding white mazes. But still, it nags at you. You've learned to notice patterns, and this breaking rhythm is loud in its silence. No smoke from their chimney, no distant shouts while shoveling snow, no glimpse of their boy fetching water from the creek like he usually does. Red scarf flapping in the wind like a flag. Nothing. By the 13th day, the worry starts eating at your edges. They're probably fine, your wife says, though her voice isn't as confident as her words. Could be their firewood's just green and the smoke isn't rising. Could be. But you know better. Greenwood still gives off something, and nothing means nothing. So on the morning of day 14, you bundle up. Not just in your usual layers. You go full expedition. 2 shirts, 2 coats, the scratchy wool scarf from back home that still smells like cedar and lard smeared thick on your cheeks. Your wife ties the blizzard line to your belt and kisses your forehead like a prayer. You nod, trying to look less worried than you are, and step out into the white. The snow is deep, not soft anymore, crusted over from days of thaw and freeze. It crunches loud under your boots. Each step a fight, the sled, empty behind you, jerks and complains with every drag. You follow the curve of the old wagon trail, mostly by memory, eyes peeled for any landmarks not yet buried. A bent tree, a broken fence post, anything. The world is so quiet it rings. Their soda isn't far, maybe a quarter mile, but it might as well be a full day's journey in this mess. The sky hangs low, heavy and gray, and your breath steams through your scarf in thick rhythmic clouds. You check the rope tied to your belt every few minutes like a superstition, tugging it to feel the tension and knowing it won't reach all the way, but needing the comfort anyway. When you finally see the top of their chimney, you almost miss it. Just a small black stub poking up through the drift. You stop, blinking through wended lashes. No smoke. The house is nearly buried. Only the top quarter of the roof shows, the rest swallowed by snow. You feel your heart thump hard in your chest. You push forward faster now, carving a path with your body. Snow piles into your boots. You don't care. You find the front door and shovel your way down to it, pounding on the wood with a gloved fist until your knuckles ache. Nothing. You try again, shouting this time. Still nothing. You dig until you can open the door. It resists, frozen at the hinges. Finally, it gives. You brace yourself for what you might find. The first thing you notice is the cold, colder than it should be. No fire going, no warmth lingering, just bitter, unmoving air. Then you hear it, a cough, soft, shallow inside, against the far wall. Bundled in rags, you find the mother. Her skin is pale, lips cracked. She looks up slowly, like it takes effort. "They're in back," she croaks. You nod, moving fast now. The children, 2 of them, are curled under blankets in the corner. Their skin is warm, barely. One is awake, eyes huge and quiet. The other stirs weakly when you touch his forehead. They're alive, but just. Their fire is dead. You check the stove, empty. Cold, no fuel in sight. The wood pile is gone. Not just gone, burned. You spot the remnants of furniture legs in the corner. They've been feeding the stove with chairs, table pieces, a door, anything that would burn. But even that ran out. They're too weak to help themselves. They'd been rationing what they had, hoping the weather would break. It didn't. You rush back outside and load the sled with everything you brought. Kindling logs, a sack of potatoes, a bundle of quilts. It's not much, but it's enough to get them through a few more nights. You light the stove with shaking fingers, coaxing the flame back like a long-lost friend. It takes. You feed it carefully and slowly. The room begins to thaw. You boil water, help the mother drink. The children eat from your hands, little bites of hard bread softened with broth. No one says thank you. No one needs to. You're not here for thanks. You stay a few hours, long enough to be sure the fire will hold, that the worst has passed. When the mother finally sits up straight and gives you a proper nod, you know it's safe to go. Before you leave, you wrap a rope from their door to a nearby fence post. Something to grab if another storm hits. It's not long enough, not ideal, but it's something. You give the oldest child your scarf too, red, bright enough to be seen in white out if anyone's looking. The walk home is harder. Your body aches from the cold and from carrying the sled back uphill. But the wind has softened a little, and you let yourself feel the smallest sliver of satisfaction. You went, you helped, they'll live. Back at your house, your wife sees you from the window and opens the door before you knock. She pulls you in and hugs you tight, and you lean into her, letting the warmth of the house soak into your bones. "They're okay," you say, voice rough. "They'll be okay." She doesn't ask for details, just hands you a hot drink and steers you toward the stove. The children are already laying out extra blankets for a potential visitor, just in case. You don't stop them. That night, you stare at the ceiling and think about snow and silence and how easily people disappear out here. Not because they give up, but because they run out of wood. There's something oddly comforting about candlelight and bread. It doesn't solve any of your